because things are good and they're how I envision them being, or, I've reached where I thought I wanted to be, I'm like, it can't be like this for long. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Growing Together podcast with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we talk about everything under the sun related to growth and becoming the very best version of yourself. We're back with another episode. It's been kind of a crazy couple weeks for us, which has led us to not posting podcasts, and it's been a little bit hard to find time to record them in between our jobs, and also just we were sick for about a week there.
Yep.
So it just kind of also just some crazy things happening, crazy good things. We went to a couple of concerts. We saw Noah Kahan. We saw the Jonas Brothers, which was me living out my childhood dreams, and I love sharing that with Caesar. Caesar had a good time though, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I had my own I don't want to call them complaints, but one thing about me going to concerts, it's something I talked to Sunny about before, is I like being able to actually hear the person you're going to see. And oftentimes, if you're too in the pit with people who are obviously really passionate about the artist you're seeing, it's really hard to hear.
I could hear him. I don't know how
my
you
ears
couldn't.
were my ears were ringing by the end of it, and I could barely hear. So yeah,
You're just getting old. I
don't
could
know.
hear
It could be I'm getting old, or I'm just my ears are way too sensitive for.
Yeah, I don't know.
anything,
I could hear fine. I think the best experience at concerts for me is when you are very up and close. I love buying pit tickets or just really close so I can see the artist. I like the visual experience too, along with obviously the audible experience. It was really, really cool to see it. What was your favorite part though of the concerts?
I mean, which one? I mean,
either one.
Either one. It's really cool. Again, it is really cool to be up close and personal to the person you're seeing. I'm a big fan of concerts and going to see live events like that. That's why I'm it's just one of those things of mine where I want to actually hear the person saying things, singing things.
The Jonas Brothers you could hear.
Oh no, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's this. I don't know. I mean, we did see Noah Kahan at an amphitheater.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
When you're in an amphitheater versus the Jonas Brothers played here in Nashville at the Bridgestone Arena. That was I think it definitely does depend where it is, whether it's outside or inside.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got on the kiss cam for the Jonas Brothers. Joe Jonas does this thing.
Which I'm still looking for footage out there. So if anyone listening,
you have footage, let us know. Joe Jonas takes one of the big large cameras and he points at people during a song. And me and Cesar were the first ones on it, and we were looking directly at Joe Jonas, but then also at each other. It was crazy. Honestly, I feel I need the video footage because no one's gonna believe me. But it was crazy. When you look at Jonas Brother in the eye. It is so crazy, but definitely fun. I think too, kind of getting into today's episode, something that's been also holding me back personally when it comes to recording episodes for the podcast is that I've been feeling really sad and just kind of going through it personally. And so I kind of wanted to talk about today that idea of always waiting for the other shoe to drop. What do you think when you hear that, Caesar?
A lot of things. I mean, as of late, I think of that one show we were just watching. It was The Bear. Oh, yes. There was a scene in the latest season where I'm blanking out on the main actor's name or whatever his role is in the film in the show, but he is with this girl. But basically, he says something about how he was always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
What?
I'm really sorry. I just
Never, ever apologize.
I just want you to know that this is really nice. So nice that
You're waiting for the other shoe.
That's it.
You want to know a secret?
Yes.
Nobody's keeping track of shoes.
Yeah, the thing is, when I saw that episode, I literally, before he even spoke the line, I said, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because I was that's how I feel. It's I live in this state sometimes where, because things are good and they're how I envision them being, or, I've reached where I thought I wanted to be, I'm it can't be like this for long. Something is going to happen to take this away from me, or to just really things up is kind of how I feel sometimes. And I don't know if it's like because of my anxiety or, but I don't know if it's my anxiety or, just, I don't know, that I feel like I don't deserve some of the things, but I always feel like the other shoe is going to drop. That it can't stay like this forever, because I think things like, not that things come full circle, but like the way of like the world is like, I guess because I feel like there's always been another shoe, that there will be in the future as well.
There's a lot to like really break down on what this really means for a lot. I mean, what it can mean for those listening, what's meant to us, what it's meant to us personally on a personal level. But yeah, I mean, I've been trying my best not to think about that, which is why it's very interesting that we're talking about this today. Because like when you said that, I'm like, oh wait, literally the last time I ever even thought about that was from that show. And then before that, I haven't thought about it in months, like, oh, I'm like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like the whole metaphor behind that, or an analogy.
It's an idiom. Yeah, it's an idiom.
Yeah.
So obviously when I was looking up this like idea of like waiting for the other shoe to drop too, it's a common saying, but I really was like, where does that come from? Like when we have like these sayings, where does it come from? And did you know where it came from?
No, I don't.
So it actually comes from, according to a source online, this was from Inc.com, it says, in the tenements of New York City in the late 19th and early 20th century, apartments were built with bedrooms on top of one another. It was common to hear your upstairs neighbor take off a shoe, drop it, then repeat the action. It became shorthand for waiting for something you knew was coming. Isn't that crazy to think about? It came from like the idea that like, yeah, you knew another shoe was dropping because like obviously people wear two shoes.
Yeah,
so therefore
the other one's gonna...
that another one's coming. I think though now it's translated into like, we don't know something's coming, but we feel like something's coming. Like, oh, it has to be because that's the way of the world, or that's how things happen in my life. And I think for like me personally, that's kind of how I see it especially when I'm in like not a really great headspace. I feel like these things always happen to me, of course. So if it's going to happen to anyone or in anyone's life, it's going to be my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I definitely get that now. It makes a lot of sense when you look at it from the perspective of like where that originally came from. I think you got to apply it to a lot of things. Like when you, like there's, like, for example, like when you hear a car roll by, you expect to hear like the sound of an exhaust, right? The exhaust of a car. But with like electric cars nowadays, and when you hear an electric car roll by, it feels really weird sometimes, especially when you're like, oh wait, it's an electric car. You have to like wrap your mind around that. So knowing that, hey, like this shoe is gonna, like, someone's obviously flung one of their shoes, right? And then so you're waiting on the other one because it's like, oh, they obviously have two shoes.
Do they?
But do they
have two shoes? That's the thing too, is like maybe they don't have two shoes, or maybe they took them both off at once, or who knows? But
you're expecting, the whole point is like,
you're expecting something because that's the way of like things, like if you take off one shoe, you're probably going to take off the other. You're not going to walk around with just one shoe on usually. But yeah, I think in my life, I've definitely been feeling that more recently, and it's kind of, I don't know how to put it. It's kind of exhausting feeling that way and thinking that way. You're not living in the now and what you currently have. So something that I thought of when thinking about the other, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, is like if you're always waiting for the next bad thing to happen, you're not enjoying the current moment that could be good that you're in. Mm-hmm. You're not enjoying the fact that things are good right now. And I think that's something I've always struggled with, is being content with where I am. Because, for instance, we are in a completely different place than we are at the beginning of this year. And in a better place, in my opinion. Like, we both have really good jobs, and, we have our own apartment, we have our own space, we have a dog. Things are really good, So on paper, I shouldn't be like, oh man, something bad's coming. But like, it feels in my mind that things are too good. It's like that saying, so like, oh, it's like quiet. You're too quiet.
So like, I think because again, like we've all had different upbringings. So do you think that maybe the environment you grew up in, like, was kind of drives that kind of drives that feeling you're feeling all the time, because I imagine if someone, someone who's lived in like war-torn Iraq, like always constantly like, being bombed or whatever the case is, always expecting to like hear a siren go off, or whatever the case is. So it's like, and they're used to, so it's like a lot of high anxiety. It's a very, like, your body's always it's super anxious.
Yeah, in fight or flight. You're like in survival mode. I think that it has to do some with how I grew up. And I don't say like I grew up, I had a bad childhood or anything like that, but my family dealt with a lot of hard times when I was growing up. And like, I learned a lot of things at a young age that you shouldn't learn at a young age, or you shouldn't have to worry about, like your parents getting fired, laid off, wondering where, like, how they're going to provide, not just for us, but for themselves, that kind of thing. And it felt like we didn't catch breaks. And I felt like, for instance, there were like a couple Christmases where, Christmas time is supposed to be a fun, festive time. And obviously it's not about the presents, but when you're a kid, you look forward to the presents. And my parents would like sit us down and be like, we might not be able to go like get all the things you want. And, we're running on tough times, like money's tight, or, things would happen where we'd have to fix something expensive, like the washer and dryer would break. And that's like, it's a costly repair. Yeah. Like, and that's something like a necessity for the household. Mm-hmm. So it felt like there were always those things happening. And I was like, why us? Why our family? Why now? It became this question of like, why does this always happen to us? And, I think I've said this before. I actually said this in my sister's wedding speech too, is my dad used to tell us we're like cockroaches because you can't kill us. We're not going to die. Despite like these hard times, like, oh gosh, I feel like crying. Despite like the hard times, we make it through. So sad. Yeah, and so, like, I feel like when you grow up like that, it's so sad. I feel like when you grow up like that, you almost feel like it's obviously going to continue in your life, but also, like, when good things happen, that you don't deserve them. Because, like, you feel like you've lived life in this pattern. And in reality, I don't think it's a pattern. I think, random things happen to random people at random moments, or, as some people say, blessing in disguise, that kind of thing. But when you're going through like a hard time, any bad thing can feel very targeted. Mm-hmm. It can feel like, of course this happened to me. Like, why, universe, So I think that definitely has something to do with it. But I'm also like, I've been an anxious person for as long as I can remember. So I think anxiety definitely has something to do with it. But I mean, do you ever feel that way, or like have you felt that way where you just feel like, this can't go on for long, or like this can't work for a long time?
I mean, I've definitely felt that way with like some of my first jobs that I ever had, because to me it was like you feel stagnant in like the position that you're in or whatever it is. So like you like me in this case was like looking for another opportunity. So rather than just stay there and like work that job, like it was me like, I'm the shoe.
You're gonna drop the other shoe?
I'm gonna drop the other shoe. Yeah. But like not in this like.
But you're gonna like rip the Band-Aid off of like knowing that this isn't meant for long term.
Yeah. It's like you're instead of waiting for the other shoe to drop. In this case, I'm in the idiom. It's actually like, I'm going to toss the shoe and like go into like another room where there's another opportunity, like the door's open, like,
or you're just going to face the challenge or thing head on, which exactly. I like that you said that, because I think that's something that like it gives you the power back of like, don't wait for something to happen to you. Like, do what you have in your power to like either prevent something, or, like, if for instance, that you're in a job that's not going to work long term for like whatever reason. A hard thing, but a necessary thing is to like rip the Band-Aid off, find something else, and take maybe it's taking a chance on something that isn't as safe or like as secure as that like current thing that you're doing is. I think that's where like that's like a fear too. It's like, I think we were talking about this. So we had bought in Powerball tickets to see if we're gonna win that $1.72 billion. You know, and me and Caesar like just talking about what would we do with the money and like what would be great and like would we still work? And we started talking about well, would we still work? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, as a person, I do like working. And I was like, I'm not opposed to like doing hard work or like, you know, I love my job. I was like, but I do like the idea of not being like tied to the job, like not needing it. I was like, because right now, like, I like my job, but I also need my job. Like if I lost my job tomorrow, I'd be like SOL. So it's something I need to survive. And I was like, I think that makes it more stressful for me is like the fact that there's so much rides on me being successful in this role at this company. So like having that, you know, $1 billion to be like, okay, well, if I want to take some time to, for instance, like write a book or like do things I don't necessarily have time for at the moment, it would be nice to be able to like take time to really discover if there are other things that I'm passionate about, because I do think that that's something that is hard to do when you have a full-time gig. It's not impossible. I don't think it's impossible, but it's definitely hard to dedicate time to finding what else you like when so much rides on like what you're currently doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I like the idea of like, yeah, let's make the other shoe drop in a way that's kind of in our favor.
Yeah.
I think in my mind, I sometimes feel like I have no control over what happens. You know, I'm just like, it's gonna happen. Like, you know, what can I even do about it? When in reality, I do. There's obviously things in this life that we have control over. Like, you have control over like how you perform at work. You have control over, you know, what type of person you are to other people. But for instance, if like my company closed down tomorrow, like I don't have control over that. And like, but something I tend to do too is like, I had some pretty difficult moments this week at work, and like it came to the point where like I called my manager, and after I got off a call, and I called her and I was crying, and you know that's already hard because I hate being that person. I hate being like the crier, like someone that gets really emotional. But I told her like the way like the conversation had gone, and how I just felt very responsible for what happened. Like obviously I need to be better, and there's things that could have been prevented, and it felt like I was going to carry the burden of it. But then she also put into perspective as like, you know, it's a learning lesson, and also like here's some things that like, you know, weren't your fault entirely, you know, like this isn't all on you, like don't put the entire blame on yourself. And but that's something I tend to do is like, even if like I know it's someone else's fault, I'd rather put the blame on myself, because I'm okay, look, like let me put this on me rather than put it on someone else, because I know what it feels like to like for someone else to blame you. So I hate like blaming other people. But yeah, I was just, yeah, I don't know why I started talking about that. I can't remember.
It's because you're talking about how we're talking about obviously like instead of waiting for the shoe drop, it's like you going out and.
Oh yeah, and then I was talking about how like, you know, my company closed is not my fault.
Yeah,
you
like
know,
things
like
you can't control.
But like and so there's a lot of things that you can't control, and like I think my thing is sometimes within the things that we can't control, that I can't control, I'll still feel like bad if I felt like, oh, I could have done something better to prevent this, but in reality there's no way.
Yeah.
You know, to do that. But yeah, as we like started talking about it, I started to like look into like, well, why can't we live in the moment? Like, why as humans do we struggle to like really be in the here and now? And something that I read, and this is like direct quote, I think it's from Psychology Today. It was like, human psychology is evolutionary, hardwired to live in the past and the future. Other species have instincts and reflexes to help with their survival, but human survival relies much on learning and planning. You can't learn without living in the past, and you can't plan without living in the future. So regret, if you take like regret, for example, which makes many of us miserable by reflecting on the past, it's an indispensable mental mechanism for learning from one's own mistakes to avoid repeating them. And then like fears about the future are likewise essential to motivate us to do something that is somewhat unpleasant today, but has an enormous benefit for our well-being in the future. Wow. So like, we talk about like living in the here and now, but it's crazy that there are some benefits of like, reflecting on the past and thinking about the future. Because without that, like, our survival depends on us knowing what has worked. And again, what like, thinking about the future, for instance, like, thinking about like financial planning for yourself. If you don't plan for the future of like, okay, I'm going to put money in now because I know in the future I'm going to need it. When you're 65 and you retire, what do you have? And it's like, we knew that this day was coming and we think about the future often, but if you don't do anything about it, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. I mean, when you talked about like living in the moment, I immediately thought of like, such a like cliche thing to do or say is like, just like YOLO, like
you only live once.
Yeah, so like live in the moment. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with living in the moment. I think we tend to do that a lot.
No, I mean, I'm saying that we should.
Yeah, I mean, like there's, I'm not saying that you're not saying that we should. I'm just saying I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially like when we're just talking about events.
I wasn't saying that there was. I was saying the exact opposite. It was like that we struggle to live in the moment.
Because we're always thinking about the past and the future.
And the future versus like in the present. And I think it's hard for us to like kind of be content in like this moment right now of like what we have at this moment, because our survival depends on not just this moment, but every moment after.
Exactly.
Too.
Yeah.
So like the decisions you make have, implications for the days to come. And that can kind of be like stressful in itself, of like having to make decisions about your future. I remember being in college and, everyone was talking about like your major and like that determines your future of like what you major in, like what kind of jobs you can get. And at the age of 18, I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my rest of my life, and at that time, I feel like it's not as prevalent now. It was like you do one thing for the rest of your life. You study something and you stick to that for the rest of your life, and you become like the expert in that.
Yeah.
And that made it so difficult for me to decide what do I want to do, because as like a person who's very passionate about a lot of things, it felt like I was limiting myself to just one thing, and making that decision just felt like impossible. And to this day, I'm like, there's things that, not that I wish I would have said, like I liked the major I picked, I majored in marketing, and I'm working in marketing. But I'm also interested in other things. Sometimes I look at other people's careers. I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to know how to code or work in tech, or oh, it'd be cool to know how to do this. But in the moment, I graduated college 3 years ago, and so I started 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Or something like that. That was just like an impossible decision. It's like, I was like, this is my future and I have to choose now. I mean, have you ever like felt like that? Like had a hard time like making a decision because like how important it is like to the future or to your future self?
Yeah, I think we all have. I mean, I know I have.
I'm asking you.
Yeah, I mean, I know I have for sure, especially thinking about like coming here, moving all the way over here.
Like let's talk about that, because for me that was the easiest yes ever.
Yeah,
but for you, like
sure.
I imagine it was a little bit more like complicated.
Yeah, no, it definitely was.
What was like going through your mind when you made
everything.
a decision?
Like everything regarding like just relocating my whole life here. Again, I've never visited Nashville.
Never seen Tennessee.
It'd be different if I would have like visited this place and stuff. After talking to a lot of my team at work, like it's wild to think that there's different parts of obviously the city. Same in Vegas. Like there's different parts of Vegas too as well. Like that if you decide to live there, there's like certain things you should know about it ahead of time. So I'm really glad that like with the little research that we did, the little research I did actually to make sure we found a place that was decent.
Sister was like, the crime rates here.
Yeah, I was looking at crime.
It was like looking at crime rates. I'm like, damn, we can't live anywhere. Like,
yeah, I was just looking at like break-ins and burglary, car burglaries and stuff like that. So that was like my first thought. I was like, okay, I need to find a place that's like safe enough, or whatever the case is, like not too far from where I need to work, but it's also kind of nice, I didn't want to live in some shack in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, no, there's that was like going through my mind. Also, like thinking about the future and what this means, like while at the same time looking again at the past and like what is this? Is this really what I want to do? This is what I told myself that I wanted to do. like all these things, all these sorts of things.
What were you thinking about, like, because obviously you lived in Vegas your entire life, so this would be the first time you were living away from, like, being so close to your family. Like,
yeah, there's that too.
What was going through your mind with that? Was there hesitation there?
Yeah, no, of course. Especially like, again, we both have different upbringings, right? I always want to bring that up. So me, like, just always being around my parents, and like brothers and like cousins and stuff like that was always a thing that we would do. So it's just a thing that we can't do right now or anytime soon. So it's it was definitely difficult. It was also a difficult decision because of that, because you're away from your tribe. If you think about it, right? Yeah, it was difficult. Long story short.
I mean, yeah, and I think at the end of the day, like, it's worked out for the better because there's like opportunity for you.
Oh no, yeah, for sure.
Your career, and
no, there definitely
cost of living. I mean, I think about like quality of living too is like something we probably wouldn't have had in Vegas just because it started to get much more expensive. And obviously Nashville's like not the like cheapest, but it's cheaper than Vegas was. And and we did grow up like in very different upbringings because that's not to say it wasn't like what, for instance, I think it was moving has always been a little bit easier for me because I like ripped the Band-Aid off like when I was 18. I moved away for college and I lived in Tallahassee for 4 years. And, at that point I really only saw my family like when I'd come home for Christmas or holidays. But by the end of college I was working full time. So it was very hard to even get that time off. And then once I graduated college, I moved to Vegas. And that was like 3,000 miles away from like my mom and like my sister. So, but I've always been like away from my family. So I feel like it's just, I don't want to say it's easier, but it is easier in the sense where I'm a person that, it's not that I don't care about my family. I love my family, but I'm also very dedicated to like creating my own home, feeling home somewhere, building a home somewhere, building a life somewhere. And obviously that life's with you because, like you're the person I will spend the rest of my life with. So, I think it's interesting. It's definitely interesting that, I don't know, it's still crazy to think of all that happens. The article, though, from Psychology Today also goes on to talk about, like, some other things about, like, what stops us from, like, living in the moment. And one of them is, like, fears about the future are likewise essential to motivate us to do something that is I read that. But without fear, we would not acquire an education or invest in our future. We wouldn't be able to take responsibility for our health. We wouldn't even store food. We would simply eat as much as we feel and dispose of the rest. So it's just interesting that, like, while we say, like, live in the moment, and we should live in the moment to some degree, right? There's still that need to think about what's happened in the past and what we're planning, what your future looks like, 5-year plans, 10-year plans. And I think that's something I've always been interested in too, because I feel like I'm a person who likes to plan, but sometimes when I'm planning things, I'm like, again, how much control do I have over some of these things?
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels a little bit silly to plan because there 100% could be something that throws like a rock in everything. It throws a rock in your plans and then nothing goes according to plan. Or like, for instance, when we went to the Jonas Brothers concert, we were waiting in this line, and we were, like, there really early. So the concert was at 7, and I was like, we're going to eat, and then we're going to line up so we can be, since it was, like, general admission standing by the B stage, I was like, we have to get, like, in line very early, so we're, like, first to be right near the barricade. And we thought we were in the right line. And I started to question it kind of, like, before the show. I was like, are we sure this is the right line? And so we asked some, like, workers, yeah, right line. It ended up not being the right line. So, like, our plans to be, like, right there were not successful. I mean, we were still pretty close. But it did not go according to plan because, like, we didn't have the right information. And I think sometimes, too, like, the me I am today is not going to be the same me even I am, like, a year from now. Like, we're essentially a different version of ourselves. And, we can't really account for, like, how we'll think, how we'll feel, or how we'll be in the following year, we may, kind of like food too, like, growing up I hated certain foods, like I didn't like sushi. Now I love sushi, and I definitely didn't plan for that, but you grow and you evolve into different a different person and you have different likes, dislikes, maybe you grow more patient. So you can't really account for that in your plans too. Because you can't say like, oh, I know by this time next year I'll be the most peaceful person ever.
I mean, like you can plan, but there's obviously going to always be things that you'll run up against, and it's up to you to conquer those things, right? They always say, or just give up. But I mean, I think most people won't give up.
It's so like, I like the idea of like not giving up. I think lately I've just been so tired, and like sometimes I feel like more people need to talk about this. Sometimes you want to, like sometimes it's just so difficult to get through like some of what you're going through, or to get through those like obstacles. It really exhausts you.
Yeah, I mean, physically and like mentally, all of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, physically and mentally. I mean, that's something I've been feeling lately, is like just exhaustion, and not like even just like in the physical sense, but just like mentally, and the idea of having to like continue every single day. I'm just like, I don't know how people do this. And then I feel bad because I'm like, who am I complaining? Because everyone does this. And I'm like, so it's just like battle in my mind of, not wanting. Sometimes you just are really tired and you don't want to have to continue going over these obstacles, but you also know that in order to move forward, you have to, which is just a whole different thing. It also reminds me of the Olivia Rodrigo's new album. She has a song called The Grudge, and a lyric is like something about like, I'm trying to forgive, but I don't feel. Oh, it takes strength to forgive, but I don't feel strong. Mm. And I feel like that's the epitome of like kind of what I've felt in the past, and like just in this what we would call season of my life. It's like I just don't feel strong. When I worked at Target, a huge thing, especially during COVID, was resilience. Like, we're resilient. We're going to make it through. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to be resilient anymore. I don't want to have to keep going through these things. I don't want to keep living through these things. It comes to a point where you don't want to. It's like, oh, people will praise you for it, but it's not without, like, it doesn't mean you want to be that person, like, oh, you're so strong. I don't want to be strong. I don't want to have to deal with any of this, but I'm forced to, and other people will think you're so great because of it, but sometimes you're just like, what other people think doesn't make it worth the like kind of exhaustion you feel from it, of like just having to be strong all the time, or kind of going back to it all. Is I started to think of like, okay, what can you do if you're that person that's always waiting for the other shoe to drop? What do you do about it? Like, how do you fix your mindset, or just be okay with what's gonna happen is gonna happen. Getting kind of having peace around that. And one of the things that was written down was not to measure your success or worth by what you've achieved, but more on what you value. So like something I do, which is I need to really stop, is I love to achieve things. I love to just do well at things. Even like take the marathon. That's going to be success in itself. And, those kind of things really like bring me happiness for like a simple moment. Because I'm like, oh, people are going to think I'm so good. But not basing your whole worth on like the accolades, like not on like your title at work, not on how much money you make, not on, the things you have, but like what makes you, like those things don't make you, what makes you is like, the unique things about you.
Yeah. I mean, it's, the titles, the achievements, the gold medals or whatever the case is. Like, don't get me wrong, those are good things to have and to say, about yourself, or for other people to acknowledge about yourself. But again, I would say it's something that we shouldn't just like rely on for our like happiness all the time, because those things can always
they can go away,
change, or for the better, or sometimes for worse, depending on your situation.
And it also makes you reliant on like other people. Yeah. Your happiness is reliant on like what other people see and feel about you. I love getting like recognition at work, but I've also realized how I feel like when I don't get recognition, which is like, as an adult, it feels kind of crazy to say, but there'll be weeks where like people recognize me. I'm like, oh, Sunny's so great, or Sunny's this, and it feels good. And like, I often feel like, oh, I don't deserve that either. But I started paying attention to how I feel when like no one says anything at all. Like, not that they're saying I did bad, but they're just not saying anything at all.
Yeah.
And like I'm being honest, it felt kind of like, man, am I not doing enough? Like I need this. I need people to see me every week that I'm, a good person, or I'm great, or I'm good at my job. And I'm like, that's so unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's so unhealthy to need that to feel good about yourself, because I need to be able to feel good about myself without someone telling me, I'm great, but with me telling me, I believe in me, I'm good enough, I'm good at my job, and I know this because, versus someone else telling me. And I started to recognize that. And I mean, it's hard for me just because I've always been a people pleaser and I've always loved to get recognition from other people. But I also realized that it's not helping me to like rely on the fact that I need someone else to think highly of me before I think highly of me.
Yeah. I think we need to appreciate ourselves more.
But I think people will struggle with that. I feel like even with you, I remember we would talk about like, you are a really great video editor, and I think you're incredible. I think you're pretty advanced. And I remember you telling me, well, I don't think like I'm that advanced. I'm like, no, I think you are. But like, we tend to judge ourselves harsher than other people.
Oh, that's for sure.
And I think it's because we know that if we acknowledge it rather than someone else acknowledges it, we at least knew, like, yeah, no, I knew that, like, I've been saying that. I never said this, because it's kind of embarrassing if you're like, oh, I can do this, and then it turns out you can't. And you're like, but you said you could, like, so we want to acknowledge our downfalls before someone else does.
Exactly. Yeah. Acknowledge our downfall before someone else does. Yeah. I mean, and acknowledge pretty much anything about us before anyone else does. But yeah, the other shoe to drop, I think we should create a new idiom around this. Make it a little bit more positive.
Shoe to drop?
Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing to maybe think about is, what if the other shoe's good? Maybe there's another shoe, but maybe it's another good thing that's going to happen in your life. It doesn't have to be something bad that's going to happen in your life. I think that's what we've made it to be, is like, like the other thing has to be bad because it has to even out the good. I think we live in this like world where we think that because something good happens, something bad has to happen.
Yeah.
So that other shoe has automatically become like a bad thing, but it very well could be, the next great thing in your life. Who knows? Maybe we won the lottery, or like maybe like,
imagine the person that won the lottery.
Yeah.
And like who knows who it is, right? The only thing we know right now is they're from California, but like, what if they like, hopefully it's going to a good person, right? Who needed the money, right? And like, this is like their life-changing like moment for them, and hopefully they manage it very well and don't lose it all. Like 90.
I think it's hard to lose $172 billion.
If you look at,
it's like 100 something. It's like 700 million after taxes. But like, it's so hard to spend all that money.
I mean, well, we should do a whole episode on the lottery, but I mean, there's a lot of people that have lost everything.
Well, yeah.
Or so for some, even they were worst off winning the money. It's wild to like. There's like documentaries about people who have won like hundreds of millions of dollars, and yeah, they didn't end up in a good place after it. So, but yeah, hopefully it's good for them. Hopefully that was a good shoe for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny too how you said like, yeah, there's some people who have like it like made their life worse. And
yeah,
I was talking to my friend Alyssa. I love her. This week, and I was like venting to her. I was just having a really rough week, not feeling great mentally. Just not feeling like myself. And I was telling her, I thought like I have all the things I've been wanting. And I was like, so I can't understand why I feel so bad, why I feel so sad, why I feel so depressed. And she was like, and it makes you think of like the things I thought were problems. Were they actually problems that needed to be solved? Or was like, because I think, for instance, like my previous job, like it was very eye-opening. I learned a lot, but I also felt like it was time to go for a multitude of reasons. Like I had good experience. I knew I could like do more if I had more resources, more mentorship, and also knew that I was worth a little bit more, you know. And I thought like that would fix like some of my problems too of what I was feeling, you know. Part of it was like I needed more balance in my life. And I have a lot of those things that I was looking for, and I'm like, well, I still have problems. And, you know, I think sometimes we think that if we fix these areas of our life where we're feeling bad about or just that we need change in, that all of your problems will go away. And that's just not the case, is that there will always be, you know, that something, you know, there won't always be something bothering you, but I feel like there will always be things in your life that you have to address, or, you know, you're not going to feel super great about. But I know my problem is I aim for like this feeling of, I guess, I don't know if it's perfection or just like, oh, okay, when I get this will be when I'm good, or like, or when I do this, then I'll be happy. You know, I keep on thinking that like, once I achieve this, I'll feel good. But then for myself, I'm just setting myself up for like failure in the sense of like, I know I'm going to want more once I have this. You know, I want like getting promoted at work. Like, well, I'll be happy once I get promoted, but I know the next time I'll be like, okay, well, now I want to get promoted to this position. You know, it doesn't end. I think there's good and bad. You know, you should always strive for more. But I think there is a very good lesson in being content with where you are while you're still searching for more. You know, like just because you know that you are maybe made for greater things doesn't mean you can't appreciate where you are currently in your life. I should be able to appreciate that, like, I have a good job, a good position, and I'm learning a lot, even while I know that I want to get promoted and I want to achieve more. It doesn't mean that I can't, like, but that's something I've been thinking a lot about too, because I think that that's where I struggle, is just appreciating where I'm at now, considering that this is where I actually wanted to be. You know, I made choices that led me here, and those were the choices I wanted.
Those are the choices that we made to get where we're at here, and for you personally, right? I think that's something that we should all think about and appreciate. Yeah.
See, so you are not a man of many words.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started to think about, what do we do about it? And I think the other thing is, like, don't believe everything you think. That should be, like, a given. But I'm also I make a bad habit of, like, listening to my intrusive thoughts, or, like, you know, just negative thoughts of when I'm having a bad day. But our minds are so powerful, and it feels cliche to say this, but they really are. And I've witnessed this firsthand of, like, the impact of mindset of, like, when we run. If I'm having a bad day and we go on a run, I feel like the run is the most awful thing. I'm like, oh, I'm not pacing myself right. I can't get my breathing in control. I'm like, and it's so hard to finish. When I'm having a good day, like we ran, I think last weekend, we did like 6 or 7 miles. That felt like such a good run, and I could like keep going because I was like, this feels nice. And it was because I was in a really good mood, you know. And it's so crazy how something like as like small as like your mindset, the change in mindset can impact like even your physical ability. Like ideally, like, you know, if I can run 10 miles, I should be able to run 10 miles no matter the day, because I've done it before, you know. But your mindset can really make you think like, I can't do this, or like, you know, sometimes when we're running, you get a pain, you're like, is this really a pain, or is it because I know that I want to stop and I want to give myself a reason to stop, you know? So that's something that's crazy that I think about sometimes. It's just like how powerful like your attitude and mindset is.
Yeah, that could I remember, I don't know if it's like an old quote from a song I heard or something like that, but it was like mind over like your matter.
Yeah.
And that can often, I mean, it has helped me a lot during runs and other like extraneous physical activities and stuff like that. But yeah, I could definitely make it or break it when it comes to certain things in your life. So I think it's a great point to point out that you just gotta, sometimes you think it, you'll achieve it.
You dream it, you can achieve it. Yeah. I think it is though too, because even if you're taking like work, when I'm having like a rough day, sometimes like your to-do list feels like never ending. It feels so stressful. You're like, I don't even know where to start, and you're so stressed, and it impacts everything. But then like when you go into the day, like I can conquer anything that comes my way. It makes all the difference. It really does. And but I think that's like a practice in itself, you know, like redirecting your thoughts and kind of rewiring your brain. And I've got to tell you right now, the wires in my brain are all jumbled. Like they're not connected to the right spots. They're just all a mess. I'm pretty sure it's just like a tangled, you know, when you've tangled cords or like headphones.
Yeah.
That's what it's like in my brain right now.
Yeah.
You know, work in progress. But yeah, I just really wanted to talk about like, the whole concept of waiting for the other shoe to drop, because I think a lot of people feel like that. And like we don't talk about it a lot, you know, like there are people just constantly waiting for the next, what they feel bad thing to happen, when the next thing could very well be a good thing in your life, or maybe you don't recognize it as a good thing because you're just wanting to acknowledge that something bad is meant to happen to you, you know?
Exactly.
But yeah, that's all I had for today. Do you got any closing thoughts, Caesar?
No, but it's insane how quickly the year has flown by.
Yeah, it's October, man.
And I hope the rest of these days and the rest of the months left in this year are full of no shoes dropping. But if there are shoes that drop,
no, we want all the shoes to drop. We want it to because it could be a good thing.
We want the good shoes to drop, or the good shoes to throw across the room.
Yeah. Well, really just take control of like what you can. You know, I think that's a huge thing too, is like control what you can control. Like, don't worry about what you can't. I think that's something that like we all need to do more of. Like, if you can't control it, it's not worth worrying about. You know?
Exactly.
So yeah, that has been this week's episode. We're so glad if you've listened. If you are listening, please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please leave a review, 5 stars preferably.
Yes.
If you're not feeling 5 stars, then maybe don't leave a review. Maybe reevaluate another day. Maybe you're not having a good day. But yeah, that has been this week's episode. This has been Growing Together with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
We hope to see you again next week.
See you guys later.